Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Purposeful Wisdom Podcast. My name is Dawnne Christine. Thank you guys so much for being here. For those of you just joining, welcome. For those of you coming back, welcome back, guys. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Help me grow this channel. You guys know my channel is all about self-empowerment, healing, mentally, physically, emotionally. I bring the best of the best on this platform, and today is no different. I have the awesome pleasure of welcoming in Dianne Sotomey. She's a best-selling author of her new book, Check Your Thoughts, Your Life Depends on It. How your thoughts shape your everyday life and who you become. She is also a UKCP-registered psychotherapist and trainer. In addition, Dianne is also a coach who empowers women in leadership to overcome imposter syndrome and self-doubt. Her expertise in mental health and well-being extends beyond her one-on-one work, as she also delivers talks on various related topics and training to foster parents and social workers across the UK. Dianne is a visiting tutor at the TA Institute for Psychotherapy and Counselling and currently resides in the tranquil countryside of Suffolk, England. Welcome in, Dianne. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Dawn. Thanks so much for having me. It's a
Oh,
real
it's my
pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I love technology for this reason, that we are 5 hours apart from each other. You're across
Yes.
the waters and we're able to connect this way. So thank you so much for being here. And I always like to start out with the why. What made you become a psychotherapist? What led you to this field?
Yeah, psychotherapy is not something I had ever dreamed of becoming, but I kind of stumbled into it. And so for about 14 years, I worked with traumatized children and also as a foster parent.
Ooh,
And at the time, I quickly realized that traditional parenting or love alone was not going to be enough. I needed to understand a little bit more, just because some of the behaviors my children were exhibiting at the time were so extreme. And I could also see how some of these behaviors were placing limits on their lives. And it was recognizing that was what led me into wanting to understand trauma and the role it plays in one's life. And about 4 months in, I realized I wanted to understand their minds and their behaviors and what was driving them so much more, because it just seemed so different to anything I could imagine, or different to what I had experienced. And that was when I went on to the Metanoia Institute in London to train to become a psychotherapist. So that's sort of how it started. And I haven't looked
wow.
back since. So I always credit it to my foster children, who are still very much a part of my life.
I love
Mm.
that. Might I ask you, just real quick, what behaviors actually got your attention to draw you into this field? So what behaviors were you noticing in your foster kids that you were like, ooh, I'm gonna dig deeper into this. What did that look like for you?
So there were a whole variety of them, but the ones that I found the most challenging was soiling, where
Okay.
they would, some of them would soil themselves and then smear it on the wall,
Ooh,
or
right.
yeah, and or hide it under their pillow or under their beds, or so that, because I'm quite OCD as a person, so that was quite difficult, because they often didn't know why they were doing that, and it was so easy to look at them as being defiant or difficult or naughty or annoying, or but I knew there was something that was driving some of these behaviors, and I knew if I didn't understand it, it would be easy to just look at it as bad behavior.
Right.
Also also a lot of absconding, or putting themselves at risk, or 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 what a lot of people might call lies.
Right.
Often they were not telling lies, they were just telling it from their perspective. But
Right.
but to someone who doesn't understand, it just looked like they just lie. Do you know what I mean? So it
Right.
was a lot of stuff, because for a lot of the children, they had come from backgrounds where everything, the ways they were behaving were so normal, and they had come into an environment that was calm, that was um, nurturing. So
Right.
to everybody else around me, it felt like, why are they so ungrateful? Look at where you've brought them, and they just can't settle. But of course, that in itself is trauma for them, because
Right.
it doesn't matter how dysfunctional your family is, that's all you know.
Right.
So it was trying to understand that, yes, to everybody else, they had been saved. And yes, in the long run, they had been saved from, but to the child, they know no different. They're still missing
Right.
their mom and dad, because that is their first attachment figures. So it
Absolutely.
was, yeah, so it was just learning a lot about all of this. And I think that was a real eye-opener for me in learning and recognizing that every behavior was always communicating something, and it was down to the adult to try to figure out what are they communicating that they don't quite know how to articulate yet.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's
That's
what
really
my
interesting. Yeah, that's
yeah,
really fascinating because I mean, obviously there always is a why to, behind the why of why we do the things we do. And oftentimes, especially I've talked to so many different professionals on this platform and my background in psychology, I
yes,
know that it always usually stems from childhood. And if you're
yes,
in a traumatizing environment and, there's fear, there's
yes,
shame, all
yes,
these things trickle down to and it's attached to a behavior.
yes,
So I'm gonna go out here on a limb and please let me know if I'm on the right path here with that. Did you find that when you started observing the children and they're soiling themselves and now they're smearing it, was
yeah,
was that attached to shame or fear?
absolutely, at both.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely, and also a way of keeping everybody away.
Right.
Yes, because a lot of the children, they had been abused, and
Right.
their abusers were adults. So they would do everything to keep the adult who's caring for them to push them away too, even though they need you, they
Right.
also don't want you. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? So it was very much a push pull, I hate you, don't leave me type relationship.
Right.
You
Right, because there's
see,
fear of abandonment there because that's
that's
what they're
it.
used to.
That's it.
Unfortunately, it's so sad. And then, it's hard for the child, I'm assuming, to now have this new adult figure
Yes.
because the brain is constantly in fight flight. What's going to
Absolutely.
happen new? Waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak, right? So they're
Yes.
in constant fight, flight, freeze.
Yes.
What is this adult? What are their intentions? I'm
That's
assuming that's
it.
what the child's thinking.
Yes.
And how can I protect myself the only way I know how to protect myself? So it's
That's it.
again building trust
Yes.
with now this new adult figure in their lives that like,
Yes.
no, I'm here to nurture you, I'm here to love you, I'm here to protect you.
Yeah.
And until I feel like their trauma response, that that level of fight flight freeze is actually calmed down, all the
Yes.
chemicals are back to normal, then they can kind of open up and trust the adult in their life.
Absolutely. And of course, that takes time, because sometimes I do a lot of training with foster parents, and sometimes they might feel like, but they're in a beautiful home, we go on beautiful holidays. Why are they still feeling traumatized? And it's helping them understand that the fact that they're in a safe environment is a brilliant thing, but it
Right.
takes a while for them to settle and for them to feel regulated. So that will come with time, but for the first few months, or sometimes even years, they're still in fight, flight, freeze, because they
Right.
don't trust. And
Right.
so it's the everyday things that the foster parent does, the nurturing, the spending time with, the consistency in being present with this child is what helps them start to gain the trust and to start to regulate. and not to put a time on it and think, well, they've been with me for 6 months. Why are they still playing up and they're still not feeling safe? Because
Right.
it was difficult sometimes, or even for myself, it was difficult sometimes to think, but I am safe. I provide them with safety. But of course, it's not about physical safety. It's about emotional safety. You know,
Right.
how I responded, how, because they can read everything on your face.
Oh
So that
yeah.
what you're saying alone is not what is being paid attention to, is
Right.
what they're reading, you
Yep. The
know?
body language. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what did you do if I love, like, I want to go kind of go down this rabbit hole for a
Sure.
minute. What are some of the ways that you met them where they were, so to speak?
Right.
What things did you implement to create that safe space for them, to let down their guard, so to speak? So where that now you're starting to work on building a foundation of trust. What did that look like for you?
So a lot of the times I didn't feel like I knew exactly what to do other than try to make meaning with them. So trying to find out from their perspective. I'm noticing this is happening quite a bit. And I'm wondering if, so just using that kind of language, but also I realized that my greatest asset was not so much my knowledge, but it was the relationship. So instead of thinking about what do I do next, I just thought just meet them where they are and sit in the mud with them, or in the, obviously clean up the poo and all of that, but
Right.
actually just wondering a lot and staying curious rather than drawing any conclusions, because I was aware that a lot of what they were doing was unconscious for them. It was
Right.
out of their awareness.
Right.
Okay. So they wouldn't be able, because sometimes the mistake we make is, so why did you do that? But it's not the right thing to do. And you can't meet a traumatized child at a cognitive level. Do you
Right.
see what I mean? Because they don't know. They're just
Right.
playing out something. So it was a lot of that. And just saying, you know what? Tell me what it feels like for you when you find yourself doing this. And they're like, I
Right.
hate it. I don't know why I do it. I'm like, yeah, I also sometimes find myself doing things I can't explain why I'm doing it, and I hate it. So I know what that must feel like. But let's think about what we can do differently next time when we're in a situation where we're not understanding something. We don't want to do it, but we find ourselves doing it. Do you see
Right.
what I mean? And
Right.
and and luckily I had really smart children that I could chat to in that way. But sometimes when I had a child who was not as who had some kind of learning difficulty, then we did a lot of drawing or a lot of using puppets. And I had sand
Yes.
tray with figures and getting them to describe their day for me. And so I could talk to them in third person, but they were actually telling me what was going on. And so that was how
Yes.
I could reach them and understand some of what was going on for them unconsciously. So it was very much consistently finding ways that allowed me to connect and engage with them without giving lectures, because children don't
Right.
like lectures. In fact,
No.
nobody likes lectures. The
No.
minute I feel like I'm being told what to do, I switch off, and children are no different, because so many, I remember my own son saying to me, oh, mom, you've got that voice on again. I just can't handle it. And they switch off.
Right. Right. That's just for every human being. And I love the fact that you mentioned that you have different types of therapy, because there is art therapy, there's music therapy,
Yes,
there's so many things, play therapy too,
yes,
and that's regulating the child, and they don't even
absolutely.
realize it
Yes,
because they think you're just playing a game with them. But
that's it.
so many things come
They're
out.
communicating through the
Right,
play.
they're
Yes,
playing, right, they're communicating through the play, even through art therapy. They might
yes,
draw things from their past. They might draw
yes,
things how they're currently feeling, and it's just being
absolutely.
observant and meeting them
Yeah,
where they are, like you said,
yes,
and building that rapport and trust. And I think consistency is also a play in that. I think when
yes,
children see that no matter what, you continue to show up for them each
Yes.
and every day, regardless of the behavior, that
Yes.
also eventually lets their guard down, where they're like, okay, no matter what I'm doing, this person's showing up for me no matter what. So there's that space of unconditional love too.
Yes.
And that's so
Yes.
beautiful. That's so beautiful.
Thank you. But now
Oh
it's,
my gosh.
I hope I haven't painted a rosy picture of myself, because there were times I got angry too.
Of course. We're parents. Like, I mean,
Yes.
forget it. There's times I want to, like
Yeah.
my kids,
Yeah.
it's just, it's human nature. We are
Exactly.
all flawed, and we're going to make
Yes.
mistakes. I think it's owning up to them,
That's the
and
thing.
taking that title of parent out of the equation
Yes.
in a way, and being like, all right, kid, I messed up today. Like, I'm not perfect. I'm
Yes.
still learning this mom role, you
Exactly
know?
that.
And admitting that, so that they know you're just as human. You're not on
That's
some
it.
pedestal that you think you cannot be
That's it.
wrong. I
That's
love
so
that.
true. Because I remember one of my foster children, because for me, the relationship was everything. I saw that as the greatest asset, my greatest tool. I it forced me to be authentic with them, so
Right.
that I didn't feel like, oh, I'm supposed to be all therapeutic. And because I was a human being first, so I could say, when you did that, it really did upset me. But I also know it wasn't intentional. But let's
Right.
think about what we can do differently next time. And I
Right.
remember, just being really honest about how I was feeling, but giving it to them in a way they could understand, so that if they walked in and they go, what's wrong? Because sometimes I thought I was hiding how I was feeling, and they could read it all over my face. And I'll say, and I'll tell them. And sometimes it was a phone call I had that had annoyed me, or some cold selling or something. But just being real with them, I
Yeah.
think really helped. Because I remember one of my foster children saying to me, she goes, you know what? I just never thought adults did anything wrong. But they go, you're always talking about the things you do wrong with us, that we don't even see as wrong, because you don't make us feel bad for it. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Sometimes people feel, if I own up to what I've done as a parent, they're going to use it against me. But I think the opposite. I think if the child feels invested in, and you make that one-to-one regular time with them, they'll eat out of your hand, because they know you
Right.
care and love for them. Do you know what I mean? And I
That's
think that's
right.
my experience for the 14 years, where I felt like, if I said to any of the children who were consistently being difficult in something, and I said, when you do that, it really hurts me. They couldn't deal with the fact that they were disappointing me or hurting me. But
Right.
if I said, that is wrong, why are you doing that? That's such bad behavior, I'd lose them. But if
Right.
I
And
could,
you're already traumatizing them. Because
yes,
now the shame and
exactly.
the guilt comes back in.
That's
And
it.
and and that's what a lot of parents like don't understand. Like, we're not here, like, we have to remember too, we were once kids. And
Yes.
you know, think back into when you were a kid, and if your parent ever yelled at you, like what that made you feel, right?
Yes.
And think about,
Yes.
like, especially with all the social media influence, they're already feeling guilt and shame and all these other things,
Exactly.
online bullying, all these other things that kids have to deal with today that we didn't have to deal with in our
Yes.
generations. Like, we didn't have
Yes.
internet, we didn't have cell phones, like we didn't have all this stuff. So,
Yeah.
meeting them where they are, and it's the way we communicate to our kids.
That's
We
it.
should not be guilting them and shaming them, because we were
Yes.
once kids too. It's
Yeah.
why, like, what made you do this? Like, explain to
Exactly.
me. There's a way to talk to your kids where they're
Yes.
going to be able to open up and
Yes.
communicate and say, okay, well, yeah, we did it this way, but what else can we do differently moving forward?
Yes.
Or put it on them. What can you do different? And, like, make it
That's
where
it.
they are interacting, where it is a conversation, and it's not an authority figure hovering over a child, making them feel like they don't have a voice, or that they're
Yeah.
less human than you,
Yeah. That's so true.
realistically.
That's so
Oh my
true.
gosh. I
Eh,
love that. I love to talk about your book. Check your
Okay.
thoughts. Your life depends on it. Like, what inspired you to write this? What is the entire, what is the message that you're trying to get across in your book? I love your title, by the way. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's funny because I grew up quite religious, and um my understanding of how I thought about God was that your life goes well if you're doing good things. And if you're doing bad things, then everything goes wrong. And so you have to be good all the time. And even though as an adult, I didn't buy into that, I think I definitely, it still was a belief I held unconsciously, right? So I went through a divorce about 6 years ago. And even though I knew it wasn't all my fault, I couldn't help but blame myself because I thought it was out of my hands. I didn't want a divorce, but it just happened that I couldn't do anything about it. And I took all the blame for how it was going to impact my children. And so I noticed a lot of my thought patterns, old thought patterns coming back, like, oh, you're being judged, you're being cursed, is because you did something wrong, you're not a good Christian, all these negative thoughts I had when I was a child were all flooding my mind. But I think they've always been there, but I just hadn't gone through anything so major to make them so intense.
Right.
So I remember one day going on a walk, and I saw, because I live in the countryside, and I saw, and I have loads of farms around me.
I'm
And
so
I saw,
jealous.
yes, yes. And I saw this particular farm with carefully beautifully planted rows of corn. And I don't know why they caught my eye, but it was a huge field with it just was beautiful to look at. And the other side of the road was just a medley of plants. Some were poisonous, some were um um there was an apple tree, there were blueberry trees, and then there was all these different, nothing was consistent. It was just all over the place and messy and untidy. But for some reason I was so drawn to this field, this farm with corn, and I started to think about myself and thought, I don't know why, but I started wondering about my thoughts, because I would go out on a walk to sort of calm my mind. And I thought, what if these plants were a mirror to how I could plant carefully thought out thoughts? I wonder if, because I felt the other side of the road, the field looked like how I felt inside, all over the place. Do you see what I mean? So it was, so then I thought, gosh, I wonder if there is a message in this for me, because I felt on the outside, I looked like the very, very well crafted piece of land with all the corn. But on the inside, so both were speaking to me. And I thought, I have to do something about my thoughts, because I do feel like I am I'm so dysregulated. And that was what made me go into researching thoughts and its relationship with my feelings, and how when they're not in alignment, or when they're the same, because each thought will produce a feeling that would match it. And so as I was understanding all of this in much more depth, I knew I needed to research it a bit more, because as a psychotherapist, I do understand that up to a point, but I had never understood it in terms of my own everyday life. Do you know what I mean? I could see it in everybody else's, but not mine. And so for the first time, and that was what led me onto this journey of doing my own work on my thoughts. And when I was learning so much, I thought, I've got to put this in a book, because I was sharing it with my friends, and they were like, oh my days, really? So, so that was what made me decide to put it in a book. And I felt like my thoughts, my life was depending on what I was thinking about, because I could see my self-confidence go. I could see my my self-doubts increase. I could see my body get, I was beginning to get sick. I had fibromyalgia that had not been around for a while, and it all came back again, everything. And I knew it was because I was really, really thinking negatively. So yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love where you're going with this, because that's often where, especially that I learned a lot too about how the mind works, and just the word disease, it's
Yes.
manifested. Like, people don't
Yes.
understand that we create half the diseases in our body. We really
Absolutely.
do. And a
Absolutely.
thought will shape that. So if you're in fear, you're going to
Yes.
feel it in your body. And
Yes.
it's all energy, and everything is connected. Everything is connected.
Yes.
And if you're vibrating at a low frequency and you're thinking negatively, it's like a magnet. Like, it's going to
Absolutely.
attract like. So if you're in a negative field and you're constantly in this, oh, why is everything happening to me? You're attracting more
Yes.
of that crap in your
Absolutely.
life.
Yes.
And once, and I think that's the key. A lot of people, when they hear about these things, and they're not so optimistic and open-minded to how thoughts create things, and how negative thoughts also create things, and they call it woo-woo stuff. But
Yes.
it's really true. It's really, really true, because we are all vibrating at different frequencies. We are
Yes.
energy. And
Yes.
if we are vibrating at a higher frequency, we're going to attract better things in our lives. If we think positively,
Absolutely.
we're going to attract that into our lives. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't believe that. Like, how can I just start thinking positively? Like, especially when all this stuff is happening to me in a negative way. Well, it's not easy. I
Yeah.
call it fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes too, and I love your thoughts on this. Like, do you feel that, especially when you're coaching and you're, counseling, and you're teaching all these people, especially foster parents, of how to think more positively when they're fostering a child, and a lot of negative stuff is happening, everybody's getting acclimated.
Yes.
How do you project that onto the foster parents of thinking in a positive way, so that now they're teaching the child
Right.
that same sort of structure? How does that even look?
Well, it's funny because I only teach that to someone who wants to be taught that. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just banging on a um on a wall that's not open. But
Oh, yeah.
what I might do is I might just look at help them reframe things if they're open. So I asked, are you interested in looking at this from a different perspective? And if sometimes you might find foster parents or clients who do not want to look at something from a different perspective, because if they're very much in victim mode, then my work is to meet them there and try to understand what they get out of being there, to
Right,
get them to want to do something different. So
right,
sometimes that's a process, right? But I don't just start at once, because it can put people off and feel you don't get them, or you're trivializing their situation by, oh,
right,
just think positively. Do you know what? Because I've had that where people have said that, well, just to think positive. Do you know how trivial you're making my situation?
right,
So then I might say, so what would you find helpful? And they might say, well, I just want somewhere to offload. So in all of that, I just focused on the relationship,
right,
and then I might say, well, I know you came to see me for this outcome, but this is what it's going to take. So let's know when you're ready. But in the meantime, yes, let's use this time to offload. But
right,
are you also open to, if you feel like, when I feel like you might be at a stage where you could take it further, that I can suggest that to you? And they're like, yes, of course. So I contract with them. I use the
right.
term contract loosely, but you know what I mean. So it all depends on what someone has come to see me for. But when I'm working with a foster parent who's having difficulties with their child, then I'm interested in understanding their frame of reference, because based on how we're held, nurtured, how we're welcomed into this world, determines how we view the world, others, and ourselves,
Right.
right? So if one doesn't have any understanding of that, they may not understand how they only see the negative in people, or they only see the glass half full. So sometimes I might start there with them in trying to understand what their own early years was like, because I'm curious as to how they're finding it difficult to meet the child where the child is at. So I'll use some curiosity, and then they might, well, I grew up and, you know, you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that, and these kids are spoiled and da 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 da. And so just understanding that, and then helping them understand how, as a result of what they experienced, how they look at situations similar to what they've been through, it's difficult for them to find the empathy or the willingness to look at it a different way, because they weren't afforded that. And trying to find out, if they were in that situation now, what do they wish their parent could have said to them that they never said to them?
Right.
And then I might say, do you think that might be something your foster child wants to hear from you? So that what you never got, maybe now you might be able to give it to them as you understand. Do you see what I mean? But so it's not a linear, it's never quite linear, and it's different with each individual, because not all foster parents are the same or have the same frame of reference or view of the world or of others or of themselves. So it's just understanding a little bit about them, trying to understand the difficulties they're having, and trying to figure out how their own past is hampering the work moving forward. Because I know for me, when I first started, I felt to work therapeutically with these children, I saw it as pampering, because I wasn't pampered in that way. You did something naughty, you got a smack. Do you see what I mean? And now I've got to sit and just listen, but yet you're being rude to me, you're being aggressive towards me, and I've just got to sit and just be all lovely and understanding. It took me a while to understand why that was important, but I couldn't do it until I understood my own limitations and what I needed to put in place to make sure that my cup was full. So I took myself to therapy to understand how some of my own childhood was getting in the way of me being able to meet the children where they were at, because I couldn't get my head around some of the therapeutic ways in which I needed to work with them, when it just felt like, don't spoil them, they're being spoiled. Do you know what I mean? Now that was 20 years ago, 20 something years ago. I've come a long way since
but it's really interesting, because it really does go back. If you look, you know, there's always a pattern, and it really stems down to our belief systems. And it is generational. You know, if you look back into, like, if we go back in time, even into the Great Depression, moving forward, you know, World War I, World War II, trauma, all these things, you know, the way the world was shaped, and then generationally, you know, you in that day, in your great grandparents' days, you misbehaved, you got smacked, you weren't to speak, you didn't have a voice, you didn't have, you were not allowed to speak, you were spoken to. So children in that day were
seen and not heard.
They were not able to express their emotions, which mentally, that's healthy for us to express ourselves. So generationally, now it's like, I feel like this is the tip of the iceberg, because I feel like it's finally catching up. And you have, you know, people that are very open-minded and optimistic and are learning and understand that we are always evolving. We are always supposed to learn and grow and evolve. We're not supposed to stay stagnant. And it's quite difficult for people that have that mindset of stagnation, that no, I'm set in my ways, this is what I think. So it's this conflict back and forth of not evolving with how the world is evolving, so to speak. So that carries on into generations, and now you as a child are taught this belief system. And until you have your own wakefulness, what I like to call wakefulness, and you realize, I I don't resonate with that. I'm not going to think like that.
That's
I'm not
it.
going to believe that. That's
That's
when
it.
the chain is broken and you're
Yeah.
you're open to having your child have a voice, speak for themselves,
Yes.
understand that they're in a, you know, they are a human being.
Yeah.
They deserve to freely be expressive and
Yeah.
authentic. And, you know, so I feel like we're on the cusp of that.
Yeah,
I
I
feel like,
think so too.
you
And I
know,
think, yeah, no, I agree. And I think sometimes, you know, you get the defensiveness when, you know, either a foster parent or someone might say, well, but I went through all of this. My parents smacked me, but I turned out all right. But there is a discount to what didn't work well also. It's
right,
like, well, the fact that we're functioning doesn't always mean that we're sorted. You know, because we're constantly sorting ourselves out, you know, and so it can feel quite, but when someone doesn't want to go there, you can't force them to go there.
right,
But at the same time, it's also not about just because I think sometimes the fear is, but if I listen to them, then there's no discipline, you know, and trying to help foster parents understand that actually it's not about it, because of that fear of, if I just try and understand them, they're going to run riot in the house. It doesn't mean we don't call things out, but it's just how we do it, so
right.
that there is no shame. Because like you said, um when I think about shame, shame needs secrecy and isolation to thrive, right?
Right.
So anything that's going to push that self in that, make that person feel like I'm not okay, there's something wrong with me, then you're losing an opportunity to make sense of something together that's going to enhance the relationship. Do you see
Right.
what I mean? And
Right.
so them understanding it really helps in them thinking, okay, well, let me be open to something else then. But the majority of foster parents, I must say, are incredible, you know, and they're looking for ways of, you know, to be better parents for these children, and are always looking for ways to grow in themselves so they can be more for their children too. So the majority are very open to learning, you know, which is really encouraging.
Absolutely.
Mm,
And I mean, I think that's for every parent, whether you're a foster parent or just, you know, if they're biologically yours, a parent is a parent, like you're loving that child, you're nurturing that child. And I think it, as a collective, not only, you know, should we grow as parents, because, you know, like there's no instruction booklet. You know,
yeah.
I mean, you're growing as your child's growing. And
Yes.
you have to compromise and meet in the middle and kind of figure each other out.
And
You know,
update your
so it's
parenting.
right. So it's like not only are you like observing your child grow and trying to understand where they're coming from, but you're also growing as a parent and you're
Yes.
learning because it's the first
Yes.
time, like, you know, as they age, it's your first experience into their, let's say, tween years, and then it's your
Yes.
first experience into their teen years. And
Yes.
because they have different personalities, now you're like trying to figure them out and where they are. And okay, you know, you start to realize like, okay, mom's not cool anymore.
Yeah.
There's no more cuddles, there's no more this, you know, so you're always evolving and learning. And I
Yes.
think just keeping that lane of open communication is so important, because oftentimes I even tell my own kids, I'm like, you know, not going to get it right all the time.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
owning your crap and be like, I'm learning
Absolutely.
just with you. I'm like, you know,
Yes.
my kids are, I have a tween and a teenager, and I'm like, learning with you.
Yes.
This is my first
Absolutely.
rodeo raising a teenager. So
Yeah.
like cut me some
Some
slack too,
slack.
dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I think when you show up like that to your child, that level, there's a level of a different type of level of respect
there,
that's built
there
too,
is.
because they see you as flawed too and imperfect, and I think that lets their guard down in a way to be like, wow,
Absolutely.
like I don't have to be perfect. I don't like, because
Yeah.
a lot of there's that belief system too. I know with some parents, like, oh, perfection. And it's like, that don't
Yeah.
exist. Like, get that out of
Overrated.
get
Yeah.
that out of your psyche. Like, there's no such thing. Like, just
Yeah.
show up, and it's about progression,
Yes.
progress, not perfection. Like I always tell my kids that,
Absolutely.
and I think if we meet each other in the middle and we have compromise and we have open communication, we can learn and grow together. And
Yes.
that's a beautiful relationship, whether you're a
Yes.
foster parent or a
Or a
biological
parent.
parent.
Yeah.
You
Because
know
it
what I'm
forces
saying?
you to also access the child's thinking and their intelligence. And, because if I think about a lot of what I know, I learned a lot of it from my foster children,
Right.
because they taught me resilience. They taught me about not caring about what people think, because so many of them had nothing to lose. And here I was trying to be a perfect mom and a perfect this and everything to be shiny. And because I'm a real perfectionist, or I should say I used to be, but in times of stress, it shows up.
Right. Hey.
Yeah. But they just didn't care about anything, other than the here and now, and wanting to
Right.
make sure that they were having a good time right now. But their reputation, they had nothing to lose. And I
Right.
just, they forced me to think about, if I had nothing to lose, how would I feel? But it made me think about the nothing to lose as things like whether it was status, or and making me think about how much emphasis do I put on those things. Do
Right.
you know what I mean? Or on
Right.
how I looked, or how I packaged myself, and they really gave me freedom to be me, you
Yes.
know? So yeah,
And
there's
I
a
love
lot
the
we can
fact
learn
that our
from our
kids are
children.
right. And that's what I'm saying. I love the fact that this generation, especially, they're coming from a place of being fearless. And
Yeah.
I've seen it, I've observed it. I have many Gen Z friends, believe it or not, I do. And that are professionals and that are advocates. And it's amazing. And they are fearless. They're coming from
Yes,
empowerment. And I really
totally.
truly feel they're teaching the older generations to live in the present moment, to
Yes,
be in the now, to
yeah,
not worry about what people think of you, to let that go and just be authentically you. And
yeah,
there's a freedom in just being and letting go and surrender. Show
yes,
up authentically you in this world, because it's not
absolutely.
about what other people think of you. It's about what you think of you. Because
Yes,
you have to show up for you every day. It doesn't matter what other
absolutely.
people think. And the
Yeah,
fact that this generation is teaching the older generations, like, hey, old belief systems not working
yeah,
anymore. How far,
yeah,
like, where did that
yeah,
get you?
yeah,
It's something to say, like, that we can all learn from each other. We really can.
absolutely,
We really
absolutely.
can.
And it's
And take that
difficult.
status. Right.
Yes. And it's difficult when one person isn't willing to shift. How do you learn together? Because then it's my way or the highway. Because
Right.
I
Very
know all the
challenging.
answers. I'm telling you what is right. I've lived longer than you. And as much as all of that might be true, we never arrive till
Right.
we die.
Yeah.
So already imagine when there is a parent who's parenting from that place, the number of conflicts they get because they only see things from their perspective and
Yes.
not from the child's perspective. And the child will get frustrated with that. And
My mother was like that. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Like, it was her way or no way.
yeah,
And it was very, very, it made her relationship very, very difficult, very, very toxic, because no matter what I did, I never could get through.
yeah,
And I only wish it was different in that respect, where it was more optimistic and open-minded, and realizing that you don't have to be right all the time, or what
yeah.
you say goes, because I think that's where the child pulls. I mean, where she
Absolutely.
for over 4 years, and the child pulls away, because it's just like, if I don't have my voice heard, if I'm not validated in some way, or if I can't express myself freely and openly who I am, and I have to meet your criteria, like, that's not going to work.
It's
And
one-sided.
yeah.
It's one-sided. And in other words, I am not impacting on you because I need to feel seen. I need to feel heard. But if it's all about you, that means I'm not penetrating you, but everyone wants to feel like they can they can have an impact on someone.
Right.
It's an
Absolutely.
innate need. We all, otherwise it's like we don't exist, and everyone wants to feel like they do exist or we do exist. So
Right.
when
And
it's
validated.
and validated, yes. So when it's one-sided, no wonder there's going to be difficulties.
Right.
Either the child overly adapts or they rebel,
Right.
So,
Yeah,
and
it's a little bit of both. So
yeah, yes, yes,
you learn from it, obviously. I would love
exactly.
I would love to close this out. This has been, oh my gosh, like I have to have you back on. Like seriously, this
I
has been
would
amazing.
love to come back.
We could literally talk about this stuff for hours, like you and I. I
Yes.
am like, so I could go so far down the rabbit hole, but I'd love for you to just give the viewers, give my listeners just some practical tips on how they could start improving their thought patterns. I'd love to close out with that, just to give some practical tips. And then obviously, Dianne, I'll have all your information in the description box, but also mention where people can find you as well. So for
Right.
my listeners that are not
Okay.
physically viewing this.
Okay. All right. So I would say when it comes to wanting to change your thought patterns, I designed this little meditative acronym called THINK. And the T stands for tracking your thoughts. So noticing what you're thinking about. Because until we know what we're thinking about, we don't have to do anything about it, or we don't know to do anything about it. So just notice what you're thinking about. Are they the sort of things you want to be thinking about? Because if it's your natural way of being and thinking, you won't even notice that you're being negative. And
Right.
then also when you notice it, not to beat yourself up, but just honor it. Honor it by allowing it to be there, but also seeing it as some kind of ally and wondering what it's come to let you know. So for example, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I know it's time for me to slow down. If I have angry thoughts and I stop and notice it, I know it's because someone has crossed the line with me, or whatever has happened. I can get clues. And if I'm anxious, I know maybe I'm being fearful about something I need to dig deep to find the courage to do. Do you know what I mean? So just paying attention and noticing our thoughts, the thoughts that come in as some kind of an ally, you can find a lot of wisdom there in
Right.
knowing how to manage your next steps. And then the I is setting an intention on how you're going to engage with these thoughts. How do you want to manage it? Do you want to allow them to just be? Are you going to what thoughts do you want to put in place of them? And how accessible are those thoughts? And what do you need to do if they're not accessible to you? And what I mean by that is it's okay to say, oh, I'm bold, I'm courageous. But if you don't feel it, it's not going to happen. So what do you need to do to put in place to start embodying that thought? And it might be maybe just laying down, and I love to think of an oak tree, because I have so
Yes.
many oak trees around me, and we're in the middle of some mild storm, and it doesn't matter how much the leaves are flapping all over the place. This oak tree is so steady. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's solid. It doesn't move. It's just there. Do you know what I mean? And so I have to have an image to embody so that I can then see myself in that way and then think of the thoughts that match that for me.
Right.
And then the K is for the N is for nurturing those thoughts that you believe are the thoughts to help you have a different perspective, the
Right.
positive. And then the K is for kindness, being kind to yourself, even when you think, oh, that thought again, I hate it.
Right.
Just noticing that it's there and just being kind with yourself, knowing that you are trying and it's going to take time before you eventually get the hang of it. But
Right.
Yes, so that's just a practical one that I use, and it's also a free gift you can get when you purchase my book. Yes,
Yay! Yes, people.
you can download it for free. But I also say to others, with every thought you have, there are always two sides to it. So if you feel like I'm not a happy person, there are also times when you are happy. So to just depend or rely on the side that says, I'm not a happy person, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, because you're not fully expressing all of you by just holding on to just the negative side. So if you're going to hold on to the negative, then you also need to hold on to the positive, because
Right.
one side of the coin is not a full expression of the coin, the same
Nope.
way one thought is not a full expression of you. So it's being able to hold both, so that you can have that balance and manage that, the imbalance of just one negative thought that drives everything, because there's always another side to that thought.
Oh yeah.
So it's just a thought approach that I think can be really, really useful too.
I love that. I love
Mm.
that. That is, and I love that acronym because that's so simple. That is so, so simple to even just recognize, validate it. Okay, I know why
Yes.
fear is here, but I got this.
Yes.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
So put it in check, and then nurturing yourself. Okay, what do I need to do right now? And then kind of showing that kindness, like, all right, I got this. I'm
Yes.
good. Self-regulate, balance. I love it.
Yeah.
I love that's a
Yeah.
very easy acronym for people
Yes.
to understand and remember. And where could people
Yes.
reach you, Dianne, if they want to get a hold of you, if they want your services,
Yes.
if they want to talk, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram, Dianne Sotomey at Instagram, I think.
I'll have guys, don't worry about it. I got you. I have it in the
Yes.
list.
And,
Don't worry,
and
I got you,
also,
girl.
yes, and also on TikTok. But if you type my name, I'll show up. Yes. And
Perfect.
also my website address, which is DianneSotomey.com. That's it. Yes.
Awesome.
So
Dianne,
yeah.
thank you so, so much. This was so much fun. I can't thank you enough for being here. This was an awesome conversation. And I know you provided a lot of knowledge and tools for my listeners. And the
Oh.
pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for being
Oh,
here.
thank you. Thank you so much, Dawn. I had such a blast, and you made me feel so comfortable. So thank you.
No,
Thank
I
you.
love
Thank
this.
you.
I love this.
Yes.
Guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that little subscribe button. Help me grow this channel. Let's promote overall well-being. I love you guys. Thank you so much for your support, and I will see you on the next episode. Take care.